If you're starting with this video and didn't see part 1, don't move. What you're about to hear isn't a ghost story. It's a recorded memory. One that was never meant to survive. A girl marked before birth. A ritual that was never fake. And a door beneath a chapel that should never have opened. If you've ever felt watched while alone, this is why. Like, subscribe, and stay with us till the end. Comment below. Have you ever been in a place that felt older than time? Yes or no? Aiden couldn't remember how he got inside. One moment he was screaming her name, being held back by the cult. The next, he was standing in a narrow stone corridor beneath the chapel, his hands bloodied, breath short, and the air thick like wet ash. The torches along the wall flickered in unnatural rhythms, not left to right, but in patterns, as if they were part of a language only the dead remembered. The corridor stretched endlessly in both directions, but the sounds were louder to the left. Chants, and something else, metal, dragging across stone. Aiden moved cautiously. The walls were lined with carvings, all showing the same scene repeated over and over. A child kneeling, an altar rising, and above it, an eye, not divine, but feral, watching, waiting. He reached a chamber. At the center was a massive stone circle, like a well without water, sealed with an iron door, chained, scratched from inside. The words above it read, "The blood was the lock, and now it runs free." Aiden turned to leave, but froze. Rosemary was there, on the other side of the chamber, facing the door, her back to him, whispering, not words, tones that vibrated against his ribs. He called out. She didn't move. He stepped closer, and the temperature dropped so suddenly it felt like his bones cracked. And then she spoke, but her voice wasn't hers. It was layered, like 3 versions. His of her speaking at once. The prophet lied, but not about the chains. She turned. Her eyes were not human anymore. Aiden staggered back as Rosemary turned, or whatever she was now. Her pupils had vanished, replaced by ink-black voids, veined with glowing red. But what paralyzed him wasn't her appearance. It was her expression. She wasn't in pain. She was calm, as if this had always been her purpose. He pressed his back to the stone wall, trying to breathe. "Rose, this isn't you." But her voice answered, "It always was." The torches in the chamber died out one by one, replaced by a cold bioluminescent glow coming from the markings in the stone. They pulsed with each of her words. She raised the bloody Bible. Or rather, the original version of it, older than the town, the church, maybe even the language Aiden spoke. "I needed someone," she said, "not to save me, to witness." From behind her, the iron door in the center of the room trembled, not from pressure, but from breath. Something exhaled on the other side, slow, rhythmic, alive. Aiden gritted his teeth. "What is it?" She looked up almost reverently. The hunger that made them lie, the fear that made them kneel, the God they buried, then named a devil because they couldn't understand what watched them in the dark. He noticed the chain had begun to lift, not all the way, but enough to reveal a sliver of what lay beyond. Fleshless fingers, long and impossibly thin, tapping in time with the chants rising from above. Aiden turned to run, but the tunnel had changed. The way he came was gone, replaced with endless hallways, reshaped by whatever power lived beneath Whiteridge. And worse, someone else was now down there with them. A figure in crimson robes appeared from the shadows. It was the prophet, but his mask was gone, and his face was wrong, stitched, flayed, eyes replaced with sewn shoe lids. "You opened the door," the prophet hissed, but the voice came from inside Aiden's head. "No, she did," Aiden said, pointing at Rosemary. But she was gone. Where had she gone? Why did she bring him here, if not to save her? And what if witnessing wasn't his punishment, but his initiation? Aiden ran blindly through the corridors, heart thundering, lungs raw. The path kept twisting, folding in on itself like the chapel's bones were rearranging to trap him. The walls weren't just stone anymore. They pulsed, almost breathing, like flesh stretched over something deeper. Faces flickered in the surfaces, mouths open, eyes wide, as if screaming in silence from the other side. Then, everything stopped. He stepped into a vast underground chamber, a forgotten sanctuary. Broken pews, shattered stained glass, hundreds of wax figures shaped like children lined up in rows, each holding a melted candle, a ritual reenacted in frozen terror. On the altar at the front, a plaque, built not to worship, but to contain. He collapsed to his knees, finally letting the weight of it crush him. This wasn't just a cult, it was a prison built by men who didn't understand what they were holding, so they made a religion out of it, covered their fear with sermons, called sacrifice sacred because it was easier than admitting they were powerless. And now, the lock was failing. He looked around. Symbols he'd seen in the bloody Bible were carved into the pillars. Only now, he understood what they meant. They weren't blessings, they were warnings. Ancient dialects translating to phrases like, "Never speak her name," "Silence is the offering and blood keeps her sleeping." Her? Who was she? Suddenly a flicker of white moved at the far end of the hall. Aiden stood, weak, shaking, and followed. It was Rosemary again, but this time her eyes were clear, human, tears on her cheeks. She held out her hand like a child asking for help. "You were supposed to see," she whispered. "They lied to me too." Aiden froze. What if she was telling the truth? What if she had never been the danger, but the only one still fighting it? If this happened to someone close to you, what would you believe? Comment below. Like this video, subscribe to Mystery Cults TV, and share it with someone who needs to see what's beneath the surface. Rosemary led Aiden through a narrow passage he hadn't seen before. This time, the walls were cold stone again. No more pulsing, no whispers, just silence and the heavy sound of their footsteps echoing in the dark. She stopped before a rusted iron gate, hidden beneath an arch inscribed with crumbling Latin. "He who speaks for God may lie in his name." Inside the gate was a chamber not meant to be found. Shelves of old books, decayed robes, shattered idols, and a single painting propped against the wall, half-eaten by mold. Aiden brushed away the dust and gasped. The face was unmistakable. It was the same crimson prophet who now stood above ground, leading the rituals. But the date on the painting's corner read 1897. 50 years ago, he hadn't aged a day. "He wasn't the first prophet," Rosemary whispered. "He was the first prisoner." The journals scattered across the room confirmed it. Decades ago, a man named Elias Rowan arrived in Whiteridge claiming visions from heaven, but his writings shifted over time, first sermons, then ramblings, then desperate pleas. The final entry read, "The voice has stopped whispering, now it screams." Aiden read on, piecing together a truth no one had dared speak. There had never been a divine commandment. The sacrifices weren't to honor God. They were to muffle something beneath the chapel. The rituals were designed not to protect, but to delay the inevitable. Elias had been the first to hear the voice, and the first to go mad trying to interpret it. The cult didn't follow God. They followed a man who broke, under the weight of something he didn't understand, and then passed that madness down as doctrine. And when he died, he didn't leave. He was kept alive by the chapel itself, bound to the place where his voice had first been heard, reanimated not by faith, but by the force beneath the stone. Aiden reeled, nausea flooding him. Everything, every sacrifice, every missing girl, every drop of blood, had been based on one lie, repeated until it became holy. But if the lie is exposed, what happens to the thing it was meant to contain? A thunderous crack echoed from above. Stone, splitting. The seal was breaking. Was the ritual failing? Or had it succeeded? The chapel above was collapsing. The townspeople screamed, fleeing the ritual they'd blindly obeyed for generations. Cracks spider-webbed across the walls. Bells rang without touch. The altar split in two, and from beneath it, a wind rose so cold and old it seemed to peel the color from the world. Aiden and Rosemary emerged from the catacombs just in time to see the Crimson Prophet standing alone in the ruins, arms raised, mouth open, but no sound came out, because the voice, the one that once whispered in dreams, was no longer his. It belonged to her now. Rosemary stepped forward, barefoot, eyes glowing faint red beneath human sorrow. The storm overhead swirled unnaturally. Leaves rose against gravity. Every candle left in the town spontaneously relit, and then shattered. "I wasn't the offering," she said softly. "I was the vault." And Aiden finally understood. The phrase wasn't metaphor. The blood was the lock. They hadn't been feeding a hunger. They'd been containing it, using bloodline and body as a living seal. Rosemary hadn't been chosen to die. She had been built to hold something back. But now the bloodline was ending, and with it, the lock. From beneath the shattered altar, something began to rise. Tall, skinless, faceless, a thing shaped like a person but wrong in every way. The townspeople fell to their knees. "We all ping blood." The prophet finally screamed, not words but raw terror. Aiden turned to Rosemary. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I tried. I really did." Then she whispered a name not meant for human tongues. The world shuddered, and then the screen went black. If you followed this far, ask yourself, would you rather live with a lie that keeps you safe, or face the truth that breaks the world? Like, subscribe, and comment below. Would you open the door if you knew something was waiting? Yes? No? Or, I already did?